Welcome to Gross Domestic Problem, the podcast that tackles America's biggest and most urgent crisis head on. The economy is on the brink. Americans feel it. But what if the real cause of the squeeze in their bank account, like an iceberg about to sink a ship, was mostly invisible? That iceberg? The national debt. Every episode of this show will be focused on unveiling this slow motion disaster. How do we get here? What happens if we don't get it under control? And what's the least painful way out? And what do we do in the meantime? There is no do-nothing solution, and every solution will require some sacrifice. But refusing that pain for ourselves means handing it on to the future with little to no control over who it hurts. And if you're like us, that's unacceptable. So let's dive in. All right, we are here on Gross Domestic Problem, looking forward to this conversation for some time now. And I have with me two people I couldn't possibly be more excited to share with you all. That's Ryan Green and Austin Berg from Ironlight. And we are so excited to have this conversation and to get a look at something that these guys see that most people don't ever see, and how that affects the United States' gross domestic problem, which of course is the iceberg and slow motion disaster of our national debt. Austin and Ryan, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, man.
And guys, just because there are going to be people who, as well known as you are in my circles, not everybody who hears this show is going to know who you are in advance. Why don't you go ahead and just let us know quickly, what's the Reader's Digest bio on Ryan and Austin? Who are you guys? How did you wind up doing the things you're doing?
Well, Ryan hired me. I'd known Ryan since I was probably 18 years old, because I was an intern at a think tank where we both worked. And we are both from Illinois, born and raised. And we worked at the Illinois Policy Institute together. And when we started working together full time, we had a marketing team of like 4 or 5 people in a closet, like a literal closet on LaSalle and Adams, which is like right in the middle of downtown Chicago in the Loop. And in a really difficult policy environment, we were able to get a lot of great wins for some really inspiring people and causes, using storytelling, digital marketing, community building, and not really abiding by the rules of traditional government affairs or traditional political campaigning.
Yeah.
And after that success, we had really grown the team a lot, and went to the board 6 years ago and said, hey, we think we have a really cool team, a really unique model, and we want to be able to work on things not just in our backyard, but all over the country. And that was the birth of Ironlight 6 years ago.
Yeah, Ryan, Austin says it all begins with you hiring him. How did that come to take place?
Luck. But then from there, luck that he was an intern when I was there. But then when I saw his application come through for a full-time position, that was an easy call. And then, the rest is history from there. Been fortunate that I've had access to a ton of really great talent, been able to recruit a lot of amazing people. Many of them have stuck with us, through the entire ride. So almost a decade together with the core team. And it's an amazing mix of creatives and data and strategists, none of which have ever worked in government or held elected office. So all outsiders, which I think is a good segue to where we are today, right? We were sort of the outsiders before there were outsiders.
I was gonna say, I can't tell if the story that we're telling is how you guys came to put this new spin on government affairs, or whether you guys are planning a run for office.
No, maybe
outsider. It's like any day now. Yeah. I just tweeted he's running.
That would get a lot of retweets if you tagged Austin. That would catch fire in Chicago for sure.
Yeah. So before we get into all the things that I spend my life talking about, I'm really interested in something you said, Austin. Ryan, I want to hear both of y'all's take on this. Not abiding by the traditional rules of government affairs. Say more about that, Austin. What are you referring to when you're talking about the traditional rules? And then what did you guys do to break them, and how has that formed what Ironlight does?
Yeah, come at it from a bunch of different angles. One of them is oftentimes when you see folks who profess to believe in competition and free markets and innovation and like the cream rising to the top and creative destruction and like themes like this, you often can tell
Everybody
where
likes those themes until they are about them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And in fact, sometimes you can, even people talking about them is like half of a signal that they don't practice it in their own lives, oddly. Like it's almost that correlated. So, and we were in an environment in the state of Illinois where it was basically like the opposition to like one of the most corrupt administrations in the history of the country, which was like the political machine that ran Chicago and Illinois. The opposition was just as captured. And there's such learned helplessness and lack of innovation and lack of risk taking.
Right.
And so I think when we think about the traditional model of government affairs, it's very well-meaning people who are mission driven and want to change something about government, and almost like paying a Hollywood agent that like goes into a black box and like produces like an offer for a movie for you. They pay like a lobbyist and they say, you can have these meetings with these three people, or I can get you like an editorial in the paper or something like that.
Right.
And we just saw how those things didn't move the needle in a very difficult environment. And not to say they're always bad, and we work with lots of lobbyists, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't sufficient to win fights when you're the underdog. And
Right.
that's kind of what I mean.
Yeah, to add to that, I would say that we were, because of the backgrounds of all the people at Ironlight, we were ahead of the trends on what, in the e-commerce space was this sort of seismic shift into direct to consumer. We saw that as direct to voter, right? Like in the past, you had to buy access or ask for permission, or someone had to bring you to someone to get a meeting. And, our thing was, you don't have to go through any gatekeepers. Like you can just go direct to the voter and engage them directly without.
Right. Right. And what's interesting about that is, of course, I can see how that turns the existing situation on its head. The existing situation being that if you want to do something, you find who the power brokers who work on that thing are, and you work with them, and they bring along such voters as they have. But more importantly, they tend to bring along influencers who have influence over voters. What you guys have done is, instead of putting your stuff on the shelves in Walmart from a government affairs perspective, you said, hey, you've brought Walmart right to people's phones and computers and stuff like that. That makes sense. Now that with e-commerce, that's become, that's for many people, myself included, that's been an unbelievable way to get to bring a thing to market. And yet for a lot of other people, it's been more of a broken promise, something that seemed like it was going to work, but then it turned out to be pretty hard to get direct to consumer. It turns out to be pretty challenging to sell, because then you have to deal with, instead of dealing with what one power broker cares about, you have to try to get your hands on what the customers, in this case, for lack of a better term, actually care about, most of which isn't your thing. So and I think that's probably why you guys have made some of the changes and adaptations you've made along the way, which it is, we've got to have the best view possible of what the consumers that we're taking government affairs direct to care about. What have you done? Like, how has that, like, what were your challenges when you started this in getting an eye on the customer, for lack of a better term, and what have you done to get that view?
Yeah. So to continue on that theme, it's product market fit, right? So, what does the end consumer want, which is the voter? What are they not getting? How do you fill in those gaps? And then there are always people, right, that you have to educate about a product or a service, and really bring them along. And it's the same, principles apply here, right? In Illinois, people were tired of the products that they were being force-fed through a monopoly that they no longer wanted, but they didn't have any other options to choose from. So a lot of them were disengaging through either apathy at the voting booth, or, in my case, just leaving the state entirely, right?
Right.
And so we saw that, as an opportunity to step in, provide alternatives, connect people to alternatives. And then the last mile of that was making them believe that if they engage, there could be a different outcome. That's always the final hurdle in our world, is you can reach people with slick messaging, great creative, but actually making them believe and seeing a pathway to making change happen, that's the last mile. That's the biggest challenge and biggest hurdle, and that's where most people fall down.
Right.
Yeah.
So, where did you like? I mean, that making great creative and slick messaging. You say that also like it's easy. Great creative and slick messaging are both very difficult to do because again, you have to relate to like most of the things that are direct to consumer, you're interrupting somebody.
Yep.
Right. I mean, to put it down to brass tacks, if you're putting an ad on some sort of social platform, or even if you're putting ads in somebody's ongoing search process, like unless you absolutely nail the fit of the like search intent, you're always to some degree interrupting, saying, look at me. And the only way you get that is by having the thing that you're telling them to look at be something they already are interested in enough, just a little bit,
Yeah.
Where did you guys like, so at some point you have to know something about the people you're trying to talk to. What have you all done to get an eye on the people that government affairs wants to talk to? Well, I mean, and as you're talking about in Chicago, right, apathy with the existing system, but it's a long way from there to actually like trying to, get Rahm Emanuel out of office,
Right.
like what at some point you have to say, what do these people want? And how did you get eyes on that in the beginning? And how do you get eyes on that now?
Well, let me just say, the way you laid it out, you're already 10 steps ahead of most people in our space. So you like identifying the attention challenge is already way ahead of the game, because most people orient around my competition is this other candidate, my competition is this other advocacy organization, my competition is, and they look within.
Right.
their
Your
industry.
competition is Nike.
Your competition
And
is
Apple.
literally everything. I have a
Yeah.
Frenchie sitting outside my office right now that is competing for my attention with this podcast, right? So like, you have to understand that, and then you have to understand the context that your creative and your messaging is appearing in, right? And so we use several different frameworks, one of which is SCARF, which Austin is now the expert on. We speak on it all the time, so he can jump into that. But we apply that, and then the backing behind all of that is a 210 million person data lake that is constantly being modeled and enriched and appended to, that allows us to do very precise one-to-one targeting down to the person level across multiple platforms, not just a single one, recognizing that I might be bouncing from my Facebook newsfeed to Instagram to texting to search to streaming March Madness, right? Like
Right.
you've got to think about where people are and how they're consuming media, and how you can interrupt it, capture attention, land your message, and then hopefully either get them to engage or persuade them in some way towards your direction. So I'll let Austin
Yeah,
jump in on
just
that.
a little on
What is
Scarf.
that?
Stuff about it. Yeah.
It's like those scroll stopping things that you were talking about. We think about that moment a lot. And SCARF is an acronym. It was developed by a guy named David Rock. It's an acronym for what triggers a fight or flight response in people, and it's status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. Those can be applied in many different ways, from what message you're using to the visual of the creative itself. Breaking, like, I remember our minds being blown in like 2020, where we could make a Facebook ad that appeared like the creative. It was like a cartoon motion graphic was like leaping out of the ad. So we basically like made a smaller version of the ad and
Like
then made
bring the
leap
white frame
out.
in a little bit,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
that
like reduce the frame and stuff like that. Like that's a certainty thing, right? Because it's the same thing. Like if you came home after a long day at work and you put your keys in the same place that you always put them, and then it was just like a monster's hand there, like that would trigger like an error
Or they
response
suddenly
in your
jump
brain.
back
It's
out
the
of the
same
bowl
kind
you
of
put
thing.
them in. Suddenly, the pattern is definitely interrupted.
Pattern's different, yeah. So then, if you take that to the policy context, like I'm looking at like some swag stuff on my desk right now. Like over the last 2 years, we've worked a lot in the energy space, and I think a lot of people in renewable energy were going into red states and saying, hey guys, don't you want like clean green energy? And everybody's just like middle finger up immediately because you're violating the R, which is relatedness. And for those audiences, the only people that they've heard speak in that language are opposed to their politics, opposed to their values, are not from where they're from. And so like you're going to trigger that immediately in a negative way.
Right.
And so in some states, we would use relatedness in the opposite way, where the messenger was a farmer who wanted to be able to put up solar panels on their land. The government was telling them no. It was an autonomy argument about property rights, which is the A. I should be able to make a choice. It was an autonomy argument on I want to do something to lower the cost of my energy, instead of immediately triggering that relatedness response. There's a really tons of interesting research about that. But one of the craziest things is if you perceive someone as like you or in group, or like, well, when we started this call, like you and Ryan both had like college basketball black hats on, right? Like that, when you perceive someone that way, you're processing what they're saying through some of the same circuitry as your own thoughts, which is really kind of a nuts thing to think about.
That's true.
Conversely, if the person you see as outgroup or threat, you're processing that through a completely different part of your brain from the minute that they begin talking. So you've already lost.
Right.
We think a lot about that in terms of messaging.
Yeah, and as do I, much to my own chagrin and consternation. And so, yeah, I mean, I would love to get into this with you guys and just and say, you guys have worked on some of the most interesting influence campaigns that I have seen, and I say that as a person who's worked on some pretty good ones myself. But you guys are a cut above, and so. What have you guys seen as you look around? Let me just tell you, kind of set a scene here for you, and then I want you to respond to it. Mm-hmm. I routinely spend time, a lot of time, too much time, with policy professionals who are looking at the unsustainable trajectory of the U.S. fiscal situation. And it's one of those things that if you look at it too long, it'll ruin your flipping day, because it is so bad. However bad you think it is, it's worse. Mm-hmm. And I've likened it to the iceberg that's about to sink the Titanic. Only there's a big giant sign in front of it that says, "I will sink your boat." And the captains of the ship insist on driving straight into it anyway. Mm-hmm. So every time I'm in a room with people with economists and folks who are policy people who look at this, they all come up. I mean, there's a million good ideas, from making Social Security means tested to there's so many things that we could do that would basically spread the pain out to like the least possible and allocate it to the people who could bear it the best. There are so many, like it's literally like when you see how big the problem is and that it could be solved in such, at least today, pedestrian terms, mm-hmm. You think, why in the world doesn't this happen? And eventually in every such meeting, somebody will throw up and say, yes, but the voters will never take that.
Yep.
That's what they say. Now, I understand why they think that, because the lawmakers will never write that law. That's the truth. What will the voters take? I mean, from what you guys have seen, like, where are they on this? Do they see the iceberg? Do they see the giant sign on it? What are they thinking about the captain's insistence? And in this case, the captain being lots of different people in government. It's not like one person has made this mistake. But the captain's driving the ship into the iceberg. What are they thinking? And as you guys know the voters, again, as you've talked about some of the tools that you use to have visibility on them, but also your own experience convincing them to do things.
Yeah, we actually leverage exactly what you're saying to win the most expensive ballot fight in Midwest history. We made it a retirement tax issue, right? And what you're talking about in entitlement reform, in Social Security reform, is just that. That's how it's the same. it's the same perceived interruption to the certainty game. Everyone wants to feel like if they work, you put in 30, 40 years, that there's like some pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, whatever. I'll eventually get to get off the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so that's, challenge number one. And then the other thing is like the fairness argument, right? Like no one wants to feel like Elon Musk is going to throw their grandma out in the street.
Yeah.
Right. So those are the things you're wrestling with. You got certainty and you've got the fairness argument. Those are very, very difficult to overcome. And I think the only thing that we have that's going to give us hope, this might be controversial. I think some of the things like Medicare, Medicaid, health related things, I think are going to solve for themselves through technology. And the costs are just going to drop, the bottom's going to drop out of the cost structure there. I think with AI and other Ozempic, other advancements that we're having right now, those things are going to solve for themselves. I think it's going to create another challenge though, which is people are living longer, which is then going to create greater pressure if you're retiring earlier. I'm not an economist, but like, I think that's where the fight is going, and that's where everyone that's working on this issue should be focused, is understanding the trends and like, be working towards where the puck is going.
Yeah.
Austin, I don't know if you have thoughts on it, but like generally, that's my like 30,000 foot view of that issue and where it currently stands.
Yeah, I don't like the Titanic metaphor is correct, except that imagine everybody like rooting for the Titanic to just hit the iceberg because they hate the institution so much.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem with how debt is spoken about in the abstract, which big respect to, the Thomas Massey's of the world wearing the debt pin. Like this is the biggest issue, in my opinion, no doubt. However, you're saying like there's an institution in Washington, D.C. that has like this huge number that's really bad and that could turn into tax hikes later.
Yeah.
So first of all, there's no immediate threat of it. That's a huge problem. And then secondly, the biggest change I think since we started Ironlight or even started working together in Illinois policy is the rise of anti-establishment, anti-institutional, highly skeptical, conspiratorial, mystic, increasingly views among voters. And no one cares if the federal government's broke. They will care, and this is who will win, I think, of unfortunately who can call out who's going to try to hike taxes first and beat them to that and say, like, I thought the messaging on the Trump tariffs as the Trump tax, I thought that was very good.
Yeah.
For example. So people will think about it in those tax terms. Another thing I've been thinking about, well, I'm curious your thoughts about this. I was thinking about it a bit before the call. I don't have a good answer for what the messaging solution is here, but I think it's something this movement should think about more carefully is, Republicans administrations increased the debt so much more than Democratic administrations in my lifetime.
Yeah.
What does that point to? Does it point to a lack of will? Does it point to actually need to focus on getting Democrats to way more to institute these things because they actually have the latitude to be able to do it more than a Republican administration can? I don't know what that means, but it's not talked about too much in terms of what that means for a legislative strategy.
John Hart famously talks about American fiscal politics as the battle between the tax and spend party and the tax cut and spend party.
Yeah.
So yes, Republicans don't drop spending significantly, or at least they haven't in my lifetime. And at the same time, they cut taxes. And so, and right now, if you look at the challenges that different legislators are facing, some of my favorite legislators, my favorite lawmakers on the Hill are facing tremendous problems because they're the ones insisting, for example, that if the TCJA is going to get extended, that we must find ways to pay for it.
Yep.
And like for the insolence of doing that, they face not only the challenge from 1600 Penn, but also from every single dollar spent in the federal government has a constituency. Every one of those constituencies is organized because their lives depend on it. Yeah. So to be the lawmaker who says, let's pay for tax cuts, is to be the person who courts a number of new enemies. And I think that's really the challenge I was kind of, am wanting to chat with you guys about, because you've done a great job of pointing out what the obstacles are in terms of like for fiscal policy, responsible fiscal policy to obtain a good brand. You've done a great job of pointing out the obstacles. What the hell are we going to do about it, guys? Like that's where, if you guys can't help me, who can? That's the thought.
A couple immediate things that come to mind on that to me is like, you actually need to demonize, you need to have a physical real world boogeyman for who's responsible for the debt. And that changes things a lot, in my opinion. So rather than saying, vote no on the tax cuts, it's that Congress is putting debt on your grandchildren today. Congress is putting a debt on your grandchildren that they can never pay, of billions and billions of dollars that they didn't vote for. And that's reckless and irresponsible. And it's being used to fund grift and corruption that personally benefits the members of Congress, and you should name them. I think speaking to people's skepticism about the political actors who are making these decisions is one way that I've seen this really be effective. For example, just 3 weeks ago in Chicago, there was, for context, over the last 50 years, the city council in Chicago has voted 48-2, 49-1 for debt. We have the most debt of any city in the country. In fact, Chicago's the canary in the coal mine in terms of what debt looks like. It will be the first major city asking for a federal bailout, which the federal government can't afford. So I think everybody in this space should be looking closer at how this is playing out in Chicago. But the mayor proposed this crazy debt plan, $830 million bond deal, where there's no payments at all in the first 2 years, and then only payments on the principal for like 20 years. So imagine you do a mortgage like that, it doubles the cost basically of the debt over the life of the debt. It's truly insane, right?
Yeah.
The mayor, because of our crazy governance structure, has so much power to whip votes that won by one vote. But it took him 2 months. He had to expend all of this political capital to get it. We got provisions taken out of it that would have allowed them to shuffle the debt other places, and it got some good wins on that. Because the mayor, who is in charge of pushing it, we've helped drop to an approval rating of 6.6%. So in my opinion, that's, in terms of a short-term political strategy, you have to make the individual actor responsible for the debt they're putting on your kids.
I mean, I would say though that this is the importance of DOGE, because up until you had DOGE doing what it's doing, everyone was like, "Oh, government waste, fraud, and abuse, that's a myth." Like you were saying, every dollar it's accounted for. Every dollar, it's fine to take on debt because we got to help these people. It's fine to tax these folks because we got to help these people. You felt like the general public felt like, for the most part, their dollars were going to good use. This is just, part of the way we have to operate. This is just the nature of the game.
Yeah.
And, right or wrong, depending on how people look at it, I think DOGE has created the biggest opportunity in my lifetime in terms of being able to disrupt the space and really get in and tell people this game is fixed. It's designed to extract as much money as it can from you and provide as little in return as possible. Yeah. And here's the examples, right? And that's where you get over that's the disruption in the thing, right? The certainty, boom, it's wait a minute, am I living in the matrix? This is not what I was told it is. And people are going to start asking questions now about everything. People are looking at insider trading with Congress. I never thought people would ask about that in my lifetime.
That's
you have
I've seen multiple hearings on it. It's incredible.
Oh man, the trackers on Pelosi are amazing, right? So you're starting to see holes being poked in the system, and this is the direct to consumer piece, right? You're now getting out of the power broker band, where it was everything was horse trading. If you wanted to get something done, you had to call this person and these five
Yeah.
people and this public affairs firm, write a check over here,
Yeah.
go get money out of the USAID bank, whatever. And now I think that's what Elon Musk has done that is going to change the game forever. It's all direct to consumer. He has his own messaging channel that doesn't have to be filtered through earned media. I think people out of hand, like completely rejected a candidate that was being propped up by the media and being branded by the media for the first time, right? Like typically
Right.
that works.
Right.
And folks said, we're not buying what you're selling. And so, I mean, I think that's where things are headed is now we have to just continue to drill that message in that, here's where savings can actually be had.
Right.
You know,
I think where Austin, something you said that I thought was really interesting. You said that this measure passed in Chicago by one vote, and it's important to point out that the background against which that's getting measured is 49-1 for 50 years, like an unending pattern for half a century of city council members voting to take on more debt on behalf of the citizens of Chicago. I think it's worth mentioning. The thing that's most exciting to me about what you said, Austin, is that shift happened at all. And like you said, Chicago's the canary in the coal mine in that they'll need a bailout, but they're also the canary in the coal mine in that change of mind is possible. And I think, what's, to imagine, the people of Chicago saying, look, we're sick and tired of the government taking out a credit card on our children's behalf. That's it. It's enough. And so the mind change is possible. I know that you've helped me. I'm going to study this in depth for sure, because that's somebody needs to, all of that needs to be the playbook.
Yeah.
And then
I think the key thing there, sorry to interrupt, but
please do.
This is, I think the connection that needs to be made. Who's benefiting from the debt? Who's benefiting from the debt? And if you can make that connection for people, that makes it a much simpler message. There are debt eaters, they're corrupt, they do not have your best interests in mind, they provide no value to you. They're corporations, they're politicians, they're foreign entities. Like, these things eat the debt, and it's coming out of your pocketbook. And you could even, I think things like pledges and scorecards are super underrated. I don't know if there's ever been a pledge that's similar to the Grover Norquist tax pledge on debt, but I think if there were to be, this would be kind of that's a ripe thing to do. You could even attach a debt number to Ryan's point on the Pelosi stock tracker. Each lawmaker should have a debt
score. That's
score.
A great idea.
How many
awesome.
How many trillions of dollars in debt do we have because of literally this one lawmaker's vote? Like, making that the decision. It's like, this person extracted wealth from you to create this debt. I think that's what has helped in Chicago, because people realize it's people doing it. It's not just the number keeps going up, and it's people making these choices.
Well, Austin, I think it's important to talk about what led all the stuff that was a precursor that we worked on that led to that vote. Because it wasn't like they just showed up and they're like, we're gonna go against the mayor, right?
Well, if there's one thing I'm absolutely sure of, it's that didn't happen. That doesn't happen. Inertia, political inertia, it's as strong as an iceberg. You got to blow something up to move it. So what happened?
And, we talked about this actually. Like, we've been talking about a lot of folks with this in the energy space, for example. The skeptic angle opens up a lot of opportunities for messaging, for getting great policy passed. So, for example, most of my career, I was like, teachers unions are probably the most powerful state interest from what I've seen. Utilities, 10 times more powerful. They're by far the most powerful state and local political actor in every state, regardless, red or blue. And you have hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on political advocacy to get more competition in energy, new innovations. Utilities squash it like a bug, right? There's no really effective nationwide campaign on making that corruption clear. And these are just Soviet entities that essentially, are self-licking ice cream cones, and nobody even knows how the price of their energy works. Like, it's so horrible and corrupt. it's so ripe for someone to just light a match and just blow that up entirely and get a bunch of new great competition and lower prices and innovation in. So similarly, but nobody's connected the dots for people of how that works. And what we saw, like we've done campaigns in Chicago for a while, was people know everything's corrupt already. People know Congress is corrupt. They're looking for reasons to believe all the time. And you just need to identify clear reasons. And, one of them that's very apparent right now is the mayor was formerly an employee of the Chicago Teachers Union, and we had to do all this research and, task people to do this research. We're the number one spender on Chicago politics. Fund half the city council. Fund half the General Assembly. Pass debt all the time. Pass tax hikes all the time. So you have that narrative over and over and over. These people are self-interested. They're political. They don't have teachers' best interest in mind. Only 16 cents of every dollar goes to teacher representation. The rest goes to politics. They want to hike taxes and they want more debt for bad outcomes in the schools. So then when this vote comes around and it's then framed properly by media as the CTU wants the debt to fund irresponsible stuff, the CTU mayor wants the debt, then city council members, all of whom are Democrats, many of them are standing up on the floor saying, I can't put this on my grandkids. I can't, and then the messaging's easy from there. You have to connect the dots for people for like where the pressure point's coming from, because they're smart enough to point out, and they want to, people are yearning for, to Ryan's point, certainty about why these things are happening. They know it's corrupt, but they don't know how. And then autonomy of take an action to contact your lawmaker and tell them to stop this. Those were the ingredients which were built over years.
This is something that I think, Ryan, to your point earlier, and now what you just said here in the last minute or so, Austin, this is the sort of thing where I think what lawmakers can do with DOGE, I think they've misunderstood what they can do with it.
Yes,
I think lawmakers are looking at DOGE as an action item agency, to do stuff. No. And what DOGE is really great about, and what lawmakers could really get behind, even if they, it is what they could really get behind is the publicizing of the foolishness, right? Like that, like DOGE, the genius of DOGE, whatever else it does or doesn't do, is the PR campaign.
Yes.
And I think this is a thing that like lawmakers could, they could shape DOGE's activity so much by just co-publicizing every stupid thing DOGE finds.
Yes.
And it isn't, I think, again, a lot of people got really upset around the, around USAID and other things like that, that there's gonna be fumbles, there's gonna be mishaps, but I think lawmakers have conceded far too much of the argument, saying, "Oh, well, maybe we should rein DOGE in." It's like, well, maybe you should be careful about who gets to look at private, citizens' financial data. But actually, the fumbles are the fault of the people who created the problem, not the fault of the people who are trying to fix it. And I think that one way for lawmakers to keep their constituents' eye on the ball is to continue to say every single time they find something terrible, which is a lot, publicize it, talk about who benefits from it, exactly the way that you guys have said, and join with DOGE in the PR campaign against federal spending. Yeah. And even though all of these things amount to budgetary rounding errors, they all pierce the veil of the sacrosanctity of federal spending, because you say, oh my God, if there's not even an AARP for that, and we're spending that stupidly. Imagine what we would do under lobbyists. Imagine what we would do when billions of dollars are deployed to primary challenge anybody who thinks about saying anything about Social Security and Medicare. You think that we're spending money that foolishly in U.S. aid, and that Medicare is somehow tight and buttoned up?
Buttoned up.
It isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that lawmakers really can get behind and should get behind. And I think one of the ways that there's an opportunity here, and if it is squandered, it will be squandered by this. It'll be squandered by people worrying too much about the actions of DOGE and not publicizing their findings.
Exactly.
Like that's the place where I think you can get a crowbar underneath what, in a similar way to what you guys did in Chicago, we can get a crowbar underneath the situation and say, guys, like it's worse than you think.
Yeah.
Like the silly things that we're spending money on in foreign aid amount to a rounding error.
Right.
If we
And
took the
here's the
hood
thing
off of
that-
Medicare,
an interesting,
you guys would burn
limitation-
cities.
Yeah, right.
An interesting limitation of
Tesla.
Or
yeah,
Tesla
exactly.
dealerships.
One of the biggest challenges DOGE has, and I think they've made a lot of mistakes in terms of what they're there to do,
Yes.
is they're in a position where they're tied to the president and can't get out in front of the president in terms of what I was talking about before, which is naming and shaming individual actors, because there's political considerations. You don't want to just start chopping people's heads off all figuratively all over the place willy-nilly. But there are, Republicans like a Lindsey Graham or Mitch McConnell or like these. It is not hard to find oppo on these people and tie specific spending of tax dollars to those people from both sides. Yeah. And DOGE doesn't do that. DOGE is going in and saying, okay, USAID, wrap it up, and they'll do that in a bunch of different places.
Yeah.
Naming the actors is very important, because if you don't, then the conversation is about Elon Musk's DOGE.
That's right.
Where it should be about the people,
who gave
individuals
them the problem to solve.
directly
That's exactly
benefited
right.
from the spending. Yeah,
That's exactly right. Yeah.
I mean, I grew up. I grew up in Dennis Haster's district, and I remember everyone knew the Prairie Parkway, all of this federal funding that was being redirected to his district, and oh, by the way, the speaker and all of his buddies owned all of the land along the Prairie Parkway in a land trust. Oh, imagine that, right? It's like how convenient did that line up for those guys?
Yeah.
And so to Austin's point, like there's an amazing moment that's happening where people are paying attention, they're asking questions, and so two things have been addressed by DOGE that I don't care if they save a single dollar beyond it, which is the attention thing has been overcome. People are paying attention and asking questions. And the second thing is apathy, right? They are seeing changes happen, whether the bulk of the population agrees with it or not. The fact that things can actually be done to cut anything, most people thought, like, all right, so you identify it, but what can we do about it? Like,
that's right.
But there's, so you've got the two, and that's the thing we've always wrestled with in cities like Chicago or states like Illinois is, okay, you've got my attention, I'm listening, I agree, but then what can be done about it? And if you connect both dots, the momentum shifts very, very quickly.
Yeah, it's kind of like we're playing hearts and somebody just broke the suit, right? Now there are hearts on the table and we can do this.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that this reality that you've described, Austin, where DOGE is now about Elon Musk rather than about the names of the people who created these problems. This is something that Congress, and more importantly, that congressional staff should be leading. This is but by the way, this is why we're doing this event, Ryan.
Yeah.
They should be leading this effort. Yeah. They should know the names of people who benefit from the impoverishment of your children. They should know that. The voters should know that, and congressional staff should tell them.
They won't. That's the rub. I mean, they know. Everyone knows. It's the dirty little secret, right? And it's like, who's going to be? And the reason they're making it the DOGE stuff about Elon is that's the best messaging strategy, right? Is if you can make a singular person toxic, all of the work that person is doing then becomes ineffective. Which is what Austin's saying as well. Like same thing with members. Like if you can point to a member, make that member toxic, call out their bad behavior, all you need is one, right? It's like the Lord of the Flies thing. You just need the one head on the pike, and and then everyone else is afraid.
And let's say that the congressional pressure just is too much to overcome. I don't think that it is. I think there's plenty of congressional people who are just kind of sitting there. They know they want to get into this and they're not quite sure how. But let's say that none of that was true. Mm-hmm. Well, then it's up to people like us.
It is.
Y'all us, other
yeah,
people in this
yeah,
space,
yeah.
to stop playing nice about this. Like,
Yeah.
that's the thing we've all, like, because we want to continue to get congressional people to come to our meetings and speak at our events. We want to continue to have relationships on the Hill. And at the end of the day, like, what's happening is a massive squandering of an opportunity, especially in this moment where there's genuine attention on it for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
And so I think where we're at is like, I want to summon congressional staff and Congress members who I know themselves are sick about this. Like, I know members who've spoken at our events, and I've spoken to them privately, and just their stomachs turn about what is happening.
Yeah.
But they feel powerless to defy leadership or to whatever. But like, the attention economy is on them, and this is a moment where they could actually flip the script on the people who have that power, even though some of them are extremely popular.
Yeah.
Like, there's a moment.
Yeah. I would say on that, the message to them is a reckoning is coming, right? You can either ride out, the way that the current game is played and like extract as much, career value or monetary value as you can, what's it called? Get in while the getting's good.
Yeah.
But it's coming. I think for us, the fight's not, the reason Iron Light does not focus on Congress or federal level stuff is that's not where the fight is going to happen, and that's not where it's going to be won. It's going to be won in the states, in the districts. That's the thing that we've recognized is like that's where the field of play is.
Yeah.
Take these guys out in primaries or general elections or whatever.
Yeah.
If they're in office, like that's a different. There's too many variables to deal with, but the message to their staff and the people around them is, it is going to come, and it's what side of the equation do you want to be on?
Yeah. And what's cool about this, I think, is in some ways you're always like, you're inviting people to join you, but it's kind of like, I remember a friend of mine told me a story about how the first time he parked his this is a Chicago story, guys, so it'll make you feel good. A friend of mine had parked his car he had some event at U Chicago, so he parked this. It's a Hyde Park. Is that the part of Chicago?
Yeah.
So he parked his car, outside the school in Hyde Park, and he was walking. As he was getting out of his car and walking away, some teenager walks up to him and says, "Hey, I'll watch your car for $50." And the guy didn't pay.
Yeah.
He was like, "No, it's all good." And he goes inside, and he comes back out, and his car's on bricks with the tires gone. And in a way though, like the direct to consumer attention economy around this has this power to it now, where people can say to Congress, "Hey, I'll watch your car for $50. And if you're not willing to get on board here, like there's a carrot in this. You can have your name on the solution, or you can have your name tied to the problem." Exactly. But the thing is, the people don't have to put up with this anymore.
Right.
And that's the lesson that they're learning from Elon Musk. Even if they don't like him,
yeah,
like even if he fails, someone's going to come right behind him and do the thing right. Yeah. That is going to happen because as you guys have just pointed out, people realize now they're paying attention to it and they know that things can be done.
Yeah, the game's over. I would say the two groups that are at the highest risk right now that should be pivoting quickly are blue city mayors and blue city councils. That's one. And then I would say, the old school, remember, like the McConnells and the Lindsey Grahams and stuff like that. That old school way of operating, I think, is going away very, very quickly. And I would say that's where the biggest disruption is going to happen, is in those two pockets. One is on the left, one is on the right. And yeah, it's going to be with the direct to consumer thing. It's not going to be working to change these guys that have been in office for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
So
phenomenal place to end. Thank you guys so much for your time. This was incredible.
Cool, man.
Thanks, dude. We don't get a chance to do these together much, so I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform, and don't forget to subscribe to the show. Want to dig deeper? Follow us at millennialdebt.org for more insights, updates, and ways to be part of the solution. Thanks for listening.